Oh, crikey, we've got a monster here. Look at the size of his teeth.
A lot has happened this year.
I know. I'm personally a fan of the Eldies, with the D maintained.
That's somehow so much worse.
They can continue to kind of juice that melon.
Did we ever get to the Wretchies? It's sort of how I feel about awards in general.
It's going to be a fun episode for you then, Shawn.
Run, Shawn, run.
I know where you live.
I love the energy you're bringing to this award ceremony, Shawn.
I will come down hard. That was like an ethereal Leviathan that was in... Oh no, am I going to get political on the Lorecast?
I don't think this is an award. This is our equivalent of the In Memoriam segment of the Oscars.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's very special episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 D&D and tabletop RPG podcast of 2022. That's right, we're racking in all the podcasting awards, I'm sure. My name is Ben Byrne. I'm here, as always, with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake, and this year we are celebrating 2022 with the most elaborate, the most prestigious of award ceremonies. We haven't quite named the award ceremony yet, but we might workshop that a little bit later. I'm personally a fan of the Eldies, possibly, but we'll workshop to see how we go.
Sounds like we're all 90.
Eldies.
That does. All right, maybe we start there. Dael Kingsmill, what do you think? I'm just going to rattle these off and you tell me which one's your favorite. The Lorries, as in Lorecast Lorries, the Eldies, the Richies, as in Eldritch, the Richies. We got that suggestion a couple times. These suggestions coming in off Twitter, which still exists at time of recording. The Ellys, which I don't mind because I'm a Last of Us fan. Yeah, it is cute. I like that one. The Ghosties, kind of more a Ghostfire themed award ceremony. Similar to the Richies, I do like this one. This is the Dritchies, with the D maintained.
It's somehow so much worse.
The Fabled, I don't mind that. Kind of ties in with Fables a little bit. Or the Elks. Which is confusing at first, but it's ELC, yes. Do we have a favorite?
See, I love the Elks, but it does make me sound like I'm a member of the secret society. Like I'm going to the Elks Club.
But that's a bonus for me. We need a secret handshake. We need tunnels under mysterious buildings. I don't know. For me, I like the Richies. I do like the Eldies. There is something that is so extra silly about that I find very charming. But I don't know, maybe the Ellys, it's just so cute.
It is cute. Shawn Merwin, do you have a preference between these?
Did we ever get to the Wretchies?
Okay, I'll add it to the list.
Okay, because I think that's
just kind of a slight mispronounce, but
it's sort of how I feel about awards in general. So we can just get right to it.
You gotta have one judge who hates the concept that they're judging.
Great. This is going to be a fun episode for you then, Shawn. James, do you have a preference between any of these?
Oh, of all of these, I like the Ellys the most. I've been racking my brain for a concept that doesn't end with E's, because we already got the Ennies in this industry. And
it's true. We can't be the Ellys, the Ennies and the Ellys.
You just ruined it for us.
I know.
Or improved it. I don't mind being the Ellys alongside the Ennies.
We're like their evil twin.
L comes before N, guys.
Yeah, when people look us up in the phone book, they'll hit us first.
We're the one on the opposite side of the D20 to the Ennies. All right, let's go with the Ellys. That seems like the popular vote. So, welcome, everybody, to the first annual Elly Awards, the most prestigious awards in all the planes of existence when it comes to tabletop RPGs. I'm sure that's true. And we're going to start with our first award, the Let Me Tell You About My Character Award, which is a personal award. James Hake, maybe I'll start with you. I'm just looking for a personal highlight. What would be one of your highlights of the year that you would want to give an award to?
Ooh, now let's get our terms straight here. Are these for events that anyone might know about in an actual play sort of context, or is this any game that I've had, bar none, best character moment?
Yes, let's go with honestly any moment in the year, full stop. Could be something you attended, could be a trip that you took, could be a game that you played, an event that happened in a game.
Us.
Yes, you are the character.
Oh my God. Okay, so the best thing that happened to the character by the name of James J. Hake that happened this year was absolutely going to Australia and being in the Ghostfire office, meeting Ben Byrne and Dael Kingsmill in person for the first time, meeting so many people.
Seeing a spotted quoll in Tasmania.
Seeing a Tasmanian devil in Melbourne. And going to PAX Australia. You know, it's killing me that I was not at PAX Unplugged first week of December, but PAX Australia more than made up for that. With honorary mention, Australia was a big time, right? It gets kind of points for being a long quantity. For like most condensed nugget of excellence, that would have to be Big Bad Con in San Francisco last week of October. That was a mind-blowingly good con. Best con. New favorite con. Absolutely. Highly recommend people go next year.
There you go. You heard it here at the Ellys first. Shawn Merwin, what about you? What is your personal or professional or both highlight of the year?
Probably not getting fired from Ghostfire is at the top of the list because you never know. You never know. But having the Aurora Kickstarter do so well, and that's been something that's been on my mind for so long. I've been wanting to do something with that idea, that setting, that milieu, if you will. And I always put off doing it by myself because I never had the resources, never had the time. And Ghostfire gave me all of those resources and time. So many great freelancers and artists are still working on it. But to see that come to fruition and seeing the work that's being done on it now to finalize it is, it was a dream come true.
Absolutely. I think we will be mentioning Aurora a few times over this ceremony. I'm calling this episode a ceremony from now on. Dael Kingsmill, highlight of the year.
Personal highlight of the year probably was my I did a Friday the 13th birthday party where out in the bush, I built a bunch of stuff. You can see here the signs that I built for the stalls that we made out of sort of fallen trees left over from the bushfires. So we built all these sort of bush stalls and made kind of a boardwalk carnival that was spooky themed, and that was delightful. Professional highlight of the year, although I'm not sure how professional it is probably while in Melbourne for PAX. I just have such a strong memory of being out for drinks with some of the folks from Sans Pants Radio, whom I love. They're the best. And I can just remember a song coming on that I didn't know, and Adam jamming out and singing along every single word of the song. And I was like, ha, 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 Adam, how silly. And then the next song that came on was, it was Faith by George Michael. And so then it was Adam and I singing along. And then the next thing it was American Pie. And now it was Adam and I and some people we didn't know from across the bar. And then we were on the furniture and we were being asked to leave. So that's probably my...
So when I met you there, I met you at a different bar from the one you'd started at because you'd been kicked out?
Yes. Kicked out is such a strong word.
Politely moved along, perhaps.
We were being enthusiastic about the music selection.
We didn't quite end up on the furniture, but that does remind me of my personal highlight of the year, which was my wedding, which was an incredible time, and the week afterwards where I was on honeymoon, cannot complain. And then PAX was incredible this year. I mean, getting to meet again Joey, yourself, and Dael in person. Shawn, I'm coming for you. To be able to meet in person was amazing.
Run,
it was just
run.
an incredible weekend. I know where you live, or at least I can approximate where you live. All right, so that being our let me tell you about my character award, let's move in to the more industry-focused awards this year. Starting with the Tavern Rumors Award, which is, and I think this one's going to be a pretty self-evident award, but I think it's worth discussing the nominees, which for my part is the one D&D announcement, of course. Getting a lot of news about Honor Among Thieves and the D&D movie coming next year. Small mention to the Lego Ideas. That was some fun news that we got sort of later in the year, people working on their Lego creations. The 2023 release schedule was a pretty big bit of news that Wizards of the Coast basically just laid out their entire kind of slate for next year. Interestingly, not anything for one D&D that we know about. Oh, actually, there might be. And I think actually this might be in contention with one D&D for biggest news of the year. D&D Beyond being purchased by Wizards of the Coast, which felt like it was last year, honestly, to me at this point. Are there any other nominees?
A lot has happened this year.
I know.
I'd like to make a very sort of minor and personal nomination here for my dear friend Brooks Donahue, who I met many years ago doing community theater in Seattle, and who, by a quirk of chance, met Chris Perkins and found his way onto Dice Camera Action.
Ooh.
Several, when Dice Camera Action was at the height of its popularity, probably like 5 years ago or something like that. And now he is going to be a published author on Keys from the Golden Vault, one of those new Wizards books that is coming out in the year to come. And I'm just so delighted for him, a person who was in my life from quite a long time ago, wandering onto the same path, who I can now kind of be a mentor and a friend to in this new space.
Adding that to contention, perhaps with the news kind of milieu around the 2023 release schedule.
If we can hook things onto other nominees, I think attached to the D&D Beyond purchase, I am still waiting to see what happens with the fact that we had that little sort of joining between One Bookshelf and Roll20.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think that's going to have unforeseen sort of impact, and I'm excited to see what it is.
This is on the business side of things, and I hate to get really cynical after hearing the wonderful things that James said.
Get cynical, Shawn.
The biggest news of the year for me, it goes along with almost all of the stuff we've been talking about, is that Chris Cox, who was the president of Wizards of the Coast, became president of Hasbro, and filling in the vacuum that he left and becoming vice president or president of Wizards of the Coast was Cynthia Williams. And the news that Wizards of the Coast was making 70% of the money that Hasbro was making. So the total Hasbro revenue pile, 70% of that was coming from Wizards of the Coast. And Hasbro was changing the way they do business to follow Wizards of the Coast model. And that's great news for Magic, for games, but it's also drawing the attention of the executives and the shareholders who are now looking at Wizards of the Coast as the one that's going to make them the money. And that news, that little bit of change in the industry where D&D went from, well, it's there and we can make some money off of that as a brand, going from that to, we want this to be $1 billion business for us.
It stinks of 2008, terrifying. Don't it?
It could be great. It could be terrifying. But we have to look at everything that comes now from Wizards of the Coast, their new release schedules, their new 1D&D plans, their new OGL plans, their buying up of other companies in that light. So for me, that was the biggest news of the year.
That's I did not know that Wizards was 70% of Hasbro's I want to be accurate, earnings or profit margin?
I think it was profit. Sure. Because Wizards can make a lot of money without spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
Whereas Hasbro in the toy industry was spending a lot of money to make a lot of money, but not as much as they could because they were spending.
Because we think of Hasbro, like I think we've made jokes on this podcast before about like, you know, Daddy Hasbro or the Monopoly man kind of coming in and shaking down Wizards of the Coast for, you know, changing their business practices or whatever. But this almost sounds like the tail wagging the dog a little bit in terms of how much power Wizards appears to have in Hasbro. And as you're saying, Shawn, the reverse being how much power now Hasbro wants to exert over Wizards to ensure that they can continue to kind of juice that melon.
Because at the end of the day, it's Hasbro that owns Wizards.
Yes, exactly. Not Wizards that owns Hasbro. And also, I think somebody mentioned it, but attaching onto the one D&D news and potentially the D&D Beyond purchase news being the virtual tabletop, what that's going to look like, how Wizards are going to continue to offer D&D content, and how that's going to be accessible, not just from the fan base, but also from the wider third-party industry. Earth-shattering
revelations of things that might be to come, or rumor-mongering that's come about. It's all attached to one D&D and all the things that we don't know about it. So,
Bala Hydra.
It feels like the biggest news of 2022.
Well, Dael, I think you've said it. The biggest news, the Tavern Rumors Award going to the announcement of one D&D, the next and final edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Moving on to our next award, which is the Oh No, It's a Trap Award for the worst news of the year. And kind of rolling into this, a couple of like ancillary news tidbits being NFTs kind of threatening for a while there, the tabletop RPG industry, or threatening to enter the space, I should say. Good old Elmo buying Twitter, kind of sucking a bit for the tabletop RPG industry. AI-generated art, I think, is something that's coming back actually as we record this into the conversation at the moment in social media spaces.
AI-generated rules text I saw the other day on Twitter.
Yes.
Oh, ew.
Existentially upsetting to me.
How do we feel about this terrible news? Does one stick out?
They're all so bad. They all suck. I feel like for me, I'm still stuck on the Twitter thing. I think that's where I'll be jammed possibly until the new year. I don't expect to be sort of, you know, bogged in the swamp there for too long, but at the moment I'm still feeling very, very deep feelings of dread about it.
It's interesting how things have gone. I almost put on here most disappointing news of the year, Hive, because it looked like it was taking off for a moment there where there was like a good mass migration. And then about a week or two from recording, Hive basically wiped everything off their server, or at least took it down momentarily, I think for security reasons, they were saying. And it's all gone back up now, but it's kind of killed the conversations that were happening there. Like, I can see posts again, but nobody seems to be posting as much as they were sort of before that happened. It's
disappointing, but not entirely unexpected. They have such a small dev team that having everyone all at once decide that they would move over, which was already a fairly unlikely thing to happen. Having it happen actually was the downfall, which is, it's so unfortunate for them. I'm sure they'll build it back into something really cool, really strong. But it has been interesting to see sort of the flux in how much activity is still happening on Twitter, right? Because I found myself not checking Twitter as often. I found that, other people weren't posting as often. And so then that had this cycle as people moved over to Hive. And then now people are back on Twitter. But that doesn't mean that Twitter is fixed.
No.
So we're in an interesting position.
Yeah, it's a tight space to be in for sure.
Can I add to the badness?
Ooh, yes. Sure.
Yes,
go ahead.
Please do.
I love the energy you're bringing to this award ceremony. Sure.
Thank you. I want all the negative
judge.
Well, I want to know, honestly, if this is good news or bad news for the year. Ooh. And it was the outing of all of the bad actors that we saw in the publishing world.
True.
And, that became a really huge deal that affected so many freelancers. And it was horrible to watch, but it was also good that it's happening. Good that it's getting out into the air. It's good that it's being disinfected. And I hope that we continue to see people being held accountable for their actions, not just in the role-playing game world, but everywhere. So that was bad news while it happened, but also something hopefully positive will come from it.
It does seem like sort of perennial bad news, whether it's Zach S. last year or his good pal Satine Phoenix this year. You know, it's always something, it's always someone. But you're right, Shawn. I think it is good that it's come to light, because the bad news of it happened quite some time ago. Or
good, maybe good,
in
but heavy.
tabletop industry terms, like, 12 months ago.
That was a ride, let me put it that way, to kind of read through what was happening around that. Just quickly on the AI art, and I'd heard sort of people talking about it being applicable to writing as well. But what I'm seeing the last few weeks, which has interested me, is AI art sneaking back into, like, it seemed like it had been thrown out of the industry pretty heavily, at least by the conversational circles that I'm in. Everybody stopped talking about it and stopped using it after a couple of weeks. And somebody made a tweet. I wish I could remember who this was. I apologize to this person. But it was basically to the effect of AI art was uncool until you could all make a display picture out of it. And it's become a, and I don't want to, look, full disclosure, I don't want to, come down on anybody who's having fun making display pictures using the AI art. If you're just kind of like, oh, this is a cool thing. Like, it's just not for me. And I think it's ethically very questionable. And I will not partake until some of those questions can be answered for me. And I feel like I'm not going to accidentally steal someone's artwork.
And
I will come down hard.
Oh, come down hard.
We're doing that.
Channeling that Shawn energy.
I will say that the bulk of the argument against AI art is not that it's not made by a human being.
No.
It's that it is plagiarism. It's mass scale plagiarism. It's plagiarism on such a mass scale that it is hard to identify who or what is being plagiarized. And the most identifiable pieces, there are quite a few that are like, oh, that is that person's style, and it's very obvious. The latest thing that got everyone making profile pictures uses the least ethical AI art library there is. It's the worst one. It's Midjourney. Midjourney is the most plagiaristic of all of them, and they're all pretty bad. And so, I have my own concerns about, like, what I have seen from AI rules generation. Some people have gotten subclasses to be generated by AI in a pretty sophisticated way. From a purely removed standpoint, it's pretty cool. To see AI develop some things that are so sophisticated, knowing that, say, like, stealing memories is an effect that causes psychic damage, for example. That's pretty neat. But who is it learning this from is the question. If Wizards of the Coast were to make their own AI generation tool by putting in all of the D&D books they've written, which they own, that's one thing. And then, they take it out and they work it around, they make it their own thing. That's perfectly ethical. It runs us into, how is work for hire ethical? How is, reconstructing an actor after they're dead ethical? We run into those questions instead, but purely legally, it's no big deal. So yeah, I highly encourage people, if you're doing that AI art thing for a profile picture, maybe start there, look for a style that you think is really cool, and please do go out and hunt down an artist who can do that for you. It's a little more expensive than $8, but your money is supporting an actual artist, not an algorithm. I can't believe
that this thing costs money in the first place. But okay,
it's $8 for the thing. It drives me crazy.
My word.
I mean, sorry. Go ahead, Dael.
Oh no, I was just going to say that there are these sort of two different ends of the sort of ethical question surrounding it, right? At the moment, where you've got, first of all, this stuff that we've been talking about, the plagiarism and theft. And, there was enough art being stolen just through the existence of stuff like Pinterest, like before making it this easy and also this difficult to detect. But on the other end of it as well, you've got the idea that the more that we buy into these things, the more we train them to get better and more sophisticated. And then down the line, it poses a significant risk to to the role of artists in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what those risks are going to be yet, but there is that question of at what point does a corporation just decide to pay for a cheap program instead of paying artists?
This is a point where I say all of this would not be a problem if we had, oh no, am I going to get political on the Lorecast? If we had universal basic income, this would not be a problem. Right? If artists didn't have to worry about I am getting political on the Lorecast. I've drank too much eggnog. If artists could rely on not going bankrupt, because good artists too are being edged out by AI. If we lived in a Star Trek future where AI could solve all our problems like this without costing some of their livelihood, that would literally be a wonderful thing. But people also need to eat and pay rent and do all that stuff. So until people aren't having
we live in a capitalist hellscape.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a capitalist hellscape, Dael. They live in a capitalist hellscape. Yeah, I mean, the AI art makes me uncomfortable predominantly for the ethical quandary of, stealing other people's work and then kind of changing it just enough. Also, I think, on a more personal level, there's something that's just icky about it. Like this piece of art did not come from human expression. This piece of art did not come from like some form of deeper feeling and expression about a thing. That intangible something that compels people to create art. Beyond the person putting in the prompts, I suppose. And also, tied into that, it's just creepy. Like somebody was doing their display picture that I saw on Twitter the other day, and this wasn't anybody I know, FYI. This was just like Twitter, somebody liked this or whatever that Twitter suggested to me. And one of the pieces of art had, their head and shoulders kind of headshot, and just from their neck down was kind of like open. Like it was like the art generator just didn't fill it in. And it has this really fleshy, like Cthulhian body horror.
The number of them that are like missing hands, or there's an extra hand where there shouldn't be one.
Yeah, I went on a deep dive. This is hilarious.
Even computers have trouble drawing hands.
The night before I got married, I was sitting in the Airbnb on my own, going to bed. And just on my phone, I went down into a deep dive on something that was called like Moab or something like that.
I read an article about this the other day.
And did you see the art? It was horrifying.
It was so scary.
It was so frightening.
Oh, man.
To the point where it gave me an idea for a D&D campaign, or maybe a cyberpunk campaign of like a ghost living in the machine, or a hag that lives in the woods and, creates these horrifying dreamscapes or something for people. I don't know, but you know what? I'm full turned around on art now. It's great for getting ideas for D&D. But yeah, there's just a creepiness to it.
That is a great, I think, argument to make in the favor of AI. It's an incredible idea generation tool. But it's when you start selling people AI-produced content, when you start no longer purchasing the work of artists and creatives to create the entire product, but the entire product becomes computer generated, then I think you truly run into a problem.
For sure.
I found her name. Her name is Loeb.
Loeb. That's right.
Loab.
That's where I was with Moab.
Look it up, but not if you're a scaredy cat.
Yeah, no, it is like legitimately
genuinely
some of these
frightening.
images are horrifying. If you're not into body horror and gore, like...
Yeah, to do it on a bright day.
Yeah, don't do it in an Airbnb in the middle of the woods when you're there on your own. All right, do we feel like one of these pieces of news is worse than the others? I'm sensing AI art, considering that we've been talking about that for a little bit.
Yeah, it's also a fresh new horror. I feel like the other ones have dulled a little bit.
Yeah, particularly NFTs. That seems to have really
gone up in smoke,
in on itself. God. Yeah. Who could have foreseen?
It's almost like the collapse and instability of several major NFT-based currencies has scared off the corporations that were driving it.
Potentially. But I think for this year, Speak Now, Forever Hold Your Peace, the Ellys, is that what we went with? No, we went with something else. No, we did go with
No, we went with Ellys, and then we doubted ourselves, and then we went with it anyway.
Yeah.
The Oh No, It's a Trap award for worst news of the year goes to AI-generated art. Speaking of which, now we shall transition back into some good news as we go to the Recovered Treasure Award for the best RPG product this year. Now, a little disclaimer about this award is that I think that, and you can feel free to disagree with me if you have a nomination you really want to make, but I feel like this should be an award for RPG products that were released this year. So Kickstarters that started this year but haven't been fulfilled yet are not in contention, but Kickstarters that might have started in 2021 but released this year might be in contention. So for my part, I've put some nominees down as the Monster Grimoire from Ghostfire. Look, it's a company podcast. Expect this at least a little bit. The Monster Grimoire. And also I'm running a Grim Hollow campaign, so that's why there's going to be a lot of this from me personally. The Monster Grimoire, the Fables, 1 and 2, Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse and Citadel of the Unseen Sun, 2 separate entries I would posit there. Dragonlance. Now, I haven't read a lot of it myself, but it's getting some good feedback, some good press, so I wondered if anybody here felt strongly about that. Drakenheim, Dungeons of Drakenheim, I think that's a strong contender. And then I've put etc., meaning if you have any non-5e as well, kind of products that you would like to put up for contention.
I'd love to put one up for the running. This is by a fellow designer named Banana Chan, Jiangxi, Blood in the Banquet Hall. An excellent new role-playing game, kind of about being a Chinese diaspora family running a restaurant and dealing with an invasion of hopping vampires, which is very silly and also sort of with this deep undercurrent of the Chinese diaspora experience. Yeah. Fantastic RPG, and done by a lot of really wonderful designers.
I'm trying to figure out where things land if, for example, the PDF for a Kickstarter released earlier than the physical copies of the book, in terms of whether it was a 2022
Sure.
release.
I mean, these are pretty, very prestigious, but pretty loose awards. So
I just can't figure out. I feel like if Kingdoms of Warfare by MCDM counts as a 2022 release, I think that that's a solid nominee. I think that it had a lot of great stuff in there. Also, I mean, look, I know that Ben's discounted it, but I'm gonna barrack for it. Very soon, the Story Brewers game Fight with Spirit, which is a game for sort of playing a sports team, a ragtag sports team.
You told me about this. You told me about this earlier in the year. I really want to play this.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's releasing like within a week or two. It's coming out December this year, and I think it's got a ton of really, really cool stuff going into it. And I just think that Story Brewers brings such interesting new bespoke mechanics to any genre that they touch. And I think that that's really cool, and I'm excited for it. And I have a playlist ready that's full of like any J-pop songs that I think would fit for the opening theme song of an anime.
Can we please play that game?
Please, I would love to.
Can you break it down just a little bit more for me? Is it, because I remember you mentioning this earlier in the year and we weren't able to unpack it, but like, is playing the sport part of the RPG, and then the flip side is like running the team and the personal dramas there within?
So it is structured very much like a sports anime, but it's a game that the mechanics run largely based on cards with sort of prompt elements, sort of in a way that is not replicating but is reminiscent of Alice is Missing,
sure.
where you'll get kind of guidelines on this is the time of day, like before school when you're at home with your family and you're going to have a scene with your mum or whatever. And so you have the sort of interpersonal dramas and character arcs with the members of the team, but then you also play the sport. And it's kind of, it's nicely sort of flexible enough that you can play any number of at the moment I think that it's specifically based around team sports, competitive team sports, but they're working on extensions that are, you know, one-on-one, sort of, so that you could do things like fencing or things like gymnastics, where it's just a whole bunch of individuals who, you know, compete against each other and a score is given at the end, that sort of a thing. So I don't know, it's just, I don't think they've done a really good job of thinking about not just sports anime, but also films like Bring It On or even Pitch Perfect, right?
Yeah, I think my access point for this would be to either play Pyre, the Supergiant game within this system, if it was applicable to do so, or my in-mind, I told you I turn every game into a role-playing game, the in-mind little play that was playing out in my head between the matches of Rocket League that I would play.
Yes. Oh, that would be so good. Yes. You could definitely play fictional sports with this as well. So I'm just saying, Rocket League, absolutely.
Sounds pretty great. That does sound pretty great. Shawn, do you have any contenders you want to add, or any that you want to speak to?
Yeah, I want to add Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel to this list. You know, the Wizards of the Coast production with 13 standalone adventures that came together in a very interesting way. Most of the people that worked on it were persons of color, and Ajit George was one of the leads and just did a wonderful job. These are very hard books to put together sometimes. They sometimes seem completely like they were scrambled and then just put together haphazardly. And I think they took care on this one to make sure that though the adventures are wildly diverse and the settings are wildly diverse, they're diverse in a way that adds to the theme of the adventure rather than detracting from it. So I want to give that a shout out. I also want to shout out something that may or may not be released before the end of 2022. Our friend who has worked on some books for Ghostfire, Scott Fitzgerald Gray, tweeted that he is going to be releasing a game for playtest either right at the end of 2022 or at the beginning of 2023 called D20 Core. And it's something that he's been working on for 22 years, or sorry, about 11 years or more, although he's been conceiving it since he started playing way back in the day. And this is exciting for me because it's playing D&D, but without classes or levels. And I've always had a hankering for a game like that has that D&D aesthetic, but completely divorces itself of that. We have to have races, we have to have levels, we have to have, leveling. And how he described this game was part of the game, the most fun part of the game while you play is what do you do when the DM asks you that. The most fun that you can have as the character, though, is, what made you who you are, or who are you? Because that should be informing what you do. And so his adherence to that principle while designing the rules makes me very excited to see how it's going to play. And if you don't know Scott's name, go to any Wizards of the Coast product that you've purchased in the last 20 years. And probably if you take 3 by random chance, 2 of those will have Scott's name in it, of those 3. He's been an editor and a designer and a developer on 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition. He probably knows more about game design, especially D&D game design, than any person working at Wizards of the Coast right now. And so that sort of experience is something that I want to see on a new way to play D&D.
I do want to take a moment to mention specifically the Monster Grimoire, which I did not work on, for the record, but was a product that seemed very specifically geared for me. I think the things that it does unique to other monster manual type releases is the salvage system and the lore, which key very well into the monster hunter as a fantasy of going out and hunting monsters, grabbing their salvage, learning the lore from that monster. That makes it easier to fight the monster if you're able to learn that lore in advance of the confrontation. And also an entire chapter on vampires getting the the same treatment that dragons get, where you have vampire spawn.
Finally, the vampires get the respect
adult.
they deserve.
Exactly, but also the concepts around the different races as different types of vampires. The dreamer, which is a grim hollow race turned into a vampire, is radically different from a dwarf who's turned into a vampire, or a gnome that's turned into a vampire. And there are abilities that have thematic meaning to that particular race of people. So I thought that was just absolutely top notch. And it also encourages me to think about in my campaign, it's both a blessing and a curse, or a blessing and a challenge, that whenever I feature a monster that's not from the Monster Grimoire, one of my players in particular who's playing a monster hunter is always like, well, what salvage can I get from this thing? And I've got to think about, what could be salvaged from this? I'm particularly proud of one I came up with recently, was the Rat King, which is in the Creature Codex from Kobold Press. They're fighting a Rat King, and I was like, okay, this is just a big pile of rats and bones and gore. What could they salvage out of this thing? And I came up with the idea that if you take some of the rat fur and gore and you can turn it into a potion, kind of following the template that's in the Monster Grimoire, you can create like a rat swarm lure, which allows you to control a swarm of rats for 8 hours or something like that. And I just encouraged to come up with magic items that are thematic to the monster from which they're made, I think is really fantastic. So props to Shawn, and by extension, James as well. For
I had nothing to do with that, but I guess I had a little bit to do with that.
Yeah. And the freelancers who also contributed to a lot of the amazing monsters that are in
Shawn
there.
and the squad.
Shawn and the squad. It's our hip hop group.
Part of the Shawn squad.
Album coming 2023. All right. I feel like we're not going to be able to pass out a single individual.
We love
for
them
this.
all.
So all of them count as being recovered treasure in the Elly Awards for this year. Moving on to the next award being, I couldn't come up with a good RPG themed name for this one, so I'm calling it Imagination Manifest, which is the award for best artwork in a tabletop RPG product. I want to give an honorable mention to Aurora. I don't know if it counts by my own rules because I don't think there's a PDF out for Aurora yet, but some of the artwork in that book is just absolutely stunning. The other nominees that I've got for the moment that we will certainly add to is Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse. I think the artwork in that is just so I even put some of it on my wall because it is just so vivid and incredible and
I just
gorgeous.
Want to leap in and say Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse as a whole, yes, fantastic, but specifically the trailer. If we're counting the musical arts along with our art, Column made such an incredible song for that, and it features the best of the art. It's so good.
wait, you're jumping ahead again. You're jumping ahead again. We have best cinematic trailer for a Ghostfire gaming product.
Dante, get rid of that.
You've got psychic powers. You've got psychic powers to predict what the next category is going to be.
No, but I agree. And in that cinematic trailer is some of the best artwork that works as a still. Like this image of this boat kind of moving with a big sea monster underneath the ether beneath it is animated within that cinematic trailer. And there's just such a beautiful dream-like quality to it. So I 100% agree with you,
Also,
James.
it's pretty colors.
We've been thinking about making stat blocks for monsters that we've illustrated but haven't statted, like Monster Grimoire stuff. And that guy.
Yeah.
I've always
What
thought
is
about
that
how
thing?
we never actually made stats for that thing. That was like an ethereal Leviathan that was in very, very early planning.
Right.
And it just never clicked into any of the stories we were going to tell in that fable. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe there's some room for that.
Legitimately, this artwork almost... So the PAX Live play that we did, I ended up running a part or the very start of Ethereal Expanse, but there was an idea at one point where I was going to run something that I wrote for Ethereal Expanse, and it was going to be this thing ate treasure, and now you have to adventure in its stomach like it's a dungeon to get that treasure back out.
Oh, cool.
But we sort of ran out of time for me to be able to write that. But yeah, I think that's a stunning piece. I'll just quickly run through the other nominees that I've got, which is again Drakkenheim. I think that the artwork in Drakkenheim is stunning and very atmospheric. That purple octocrine, I think, is the word that Monty uses to describe it in the book a lot. Kind of color really works for it. And once again, Dragonlance. The artwork for Dragonlance seems to be really impressive. From what I've seen of it. Again, I haven't had a chance to flick through it yet, but people go nuts for the cover art, particularly. Both the collectors and the normal edition. Any other nominations? Any other honorable mentions?
I would love to throw in Coyote and Crow from earlier in the year. It's got this really cool conceptual blending of like sci-fi elements plus it's sort of First Nations inspired, US First Nations, and the way that the artist has sort of blended these elements, just it captures the imagination so well. So I wanted to throw that one in there.
This one is going to be my most self-indulgent of the night, but the art for the Taldore campaign setting Reborn from Darrington Press. Mostly because I now get to have a little miniature of my favorite astral cat beast, the Adrenac, that graces the cover of that book. I love this guy, and I will never stop yelling at Critical Role to please make a plushie of this guy because I desperately want it in my life. But a miniature is good enough. It's good enough. So gorgeous.
All right. Well, we're starting to feel the crunch time on this prestigious award ceremony. So let us jump through all those mentioned worthy of the Elly Award for Imagination Manifest. This next one, Vivid World Descriptions, GM Vivid World Descriptions Award for the best cinematic trailer. I was going to say for a Ghostfire Gaming product because I don't know a lot of other companies that do cinematic trailers specifically.
Wizards of the Coast did one for Spelljammer, but if I might say so myself, ours was a little bit better.
Look, we could just award this to Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse and move on, but I also want to give a very honorable mention to Citadel of the Unseen Sun. That trailer, which I believe you wrote, James, it does such a good job at capturing the atmosphere and the dark fantasy of that adventure. And every time I'm thinking in my head of like, all right, I'm planning this adventure and they're going to be fighting this monster, and then a vampire walks in. Every time I imagine that music cue of like, bottom, when it kind of changes to talking about the Crimson Court in that trailer. It's just,
another Colin McGuinness winner. It feels appropriate for you, Ben, that you like that because we temped God of War music in that trailer before Colin's final score came in. We knew exactly the vibe that would get Ben Byrne hyped for that trailer.
Yeah, you nailed it. I can imagine
nice
exactly what song.
Our ideal audience member working in the office is the thing. We just went, Ben, you like this? And it was like, yes. And we're like, okay.
We're on the right track.
Yeah.
It is a treat for me being able to be a fan of everything that we produce. But look, honestly, I think that award goes to Pirates because it's just
it was
catchy.
the cannons.
Oh, the cannons! The cannons are incredible.
Very satisfying.
I almost have that song memorized, mainly because whenever I open our YouTube page, it was our channel trailer for a very long time. So I'd get the first 20 seconds of it on repeat. But now it's the Citadel of the Unseen Sun trailer. So, haha. Right, moving into our final few categories. Now, I'm not sure if we can award a singular one for this one.
I don't think this is an award. This is our equivalent of the in memoriam segment of the Oscars.
We apologize to all our guests for having to come on.
I originally called this the Can I Play 2 award, but maybe this should be called the, Dead Party Character award. Just giving an honorable mention for all our guests that came onto the Eldritch Lorecast this year. Logan Reese, early in the year, RuneSmith came on actually a couple times to the point where when I got emails into podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, if you want to ask us a question, it would be to Ben, James, Shawn, Dael, and /or Logan at one point there. Jim Davis was a real treat to have on. I was a big fan of Jim's work before coming onto Ghostfire. Joe Rasso from Ghostfire himself has been on just recently, but you have no idea what we talked about because we're recording this in advance. Monty and Kelly, the Dungeon Dudes, coming on repeatedly to talk about Drakkenheim was a real treat, and those gents are just amazing to hang out with. Matt Colville very graciously stepping up last minute when Dael wasn't able to make it, and that was a lot of fun as well because that was really like just before the one D&D announcement, so there was a lot of fun there. Sly Flourish, one of my favorite guests for just Australians love being made fun of, and we love watching other people get made fun of, and just having Sly make fun of Shawn for an hour.
It kills me that I wasn't there for that one. God, how I would have loved it.
Oh, it was so fantastic. Gabe Hicks, of course, who came on, I think, relatively last minute as well. So thank you, Gabe, for coming on and adding your voice to the OGL discussion, I think was the news that week. Amy Dallin as well coming on recently. Was a real treat to talk about Dael's sewn shut pockets. And Luna Leboffen, who we don't know what we talked about because she's on when we're recording tomorrow.
I know. I remember very well what we did. And she played the flute like an absolute savant. And I
looking...
The John Malkovich impressions were amazing.
I can't believe she did a backflip.
A backflip, an actual backflip on camera.
So yeah, thank you to all those people for coming on. Is there any particular memory apart from Leboffen's amazing acrobatic abilities that anybody wants to give a quick mention to?
I'm trying to remember. It might not have quite been this year. It might have. It's borderline between whether it was the end of last year or the start of this year. But when that bird got into Logan's office,
yeah, I think that was this year.
I'm sorry, my cat just. Did you see that? My cat just brought in a bird. No, it went behind the fish tank.
Thank you to all those guests. Let us jump into, I believe, is our final category, the Thanks for the Memories Award, which is just
the moment everyone's been waiting for.
Yeah, the award of the night, which is just I asked for suggestions for award categories on Twitter, also on the YouTube channel and in our Discord, and we got a bunch of suggestions for things that I'm sure they're like general public wouldn't really find that amusing, but fans of the Lorecast apparently will. These were things like the Witcher Watch Award for the best Witcher Watch of the year, the James Haker Deep Dive Award for James just diving really deeply into a topic. The
Is that
Shawn
something
Merwin,
I'm known for?
Just going hard into like something like Fables is something particularly because you're very passionate about it, but you definitely did it on the PAX panel as well with like horror in tabletop RPGs. It was a lot of fun doing that panel with you, James, because you had like a flood of energy that day. It seemed like you seemed like you were enjoying yourself, which made me enjoy being there with you.
If the characters will ever notice that they are about to die because there's a bomb under their table.
Well, as opposed to these panels where I'm just like,
you didn't enjoy being there with me.
It's the theater kid energy. It's the in front of a live crowd.
Yes,
energy. 100%.
Yeah,
easy.
You're totally right. You're absolutely right. If I haven't mentioned already, the Shawn Merwin Wisdom Drop Award, where Shawn comes in and drops some wisdom on us. I liked the Dael Kingsmill Chaos Moment Award and wanted to nominate when Dael ate a Lamington on the podcast. That was, as I put on those, where that they tie to your strength and or dex modifier. So you can own, is that a Lamington? I love Lamingtons. Lamingtons are like that's just, if you could have pulled up any other dessert then, I wouldn't have said anything, but a Lamington in particular. That was one of my favorite moments. But I also like the Dael Stuff You Don't Know Award, which is like my best example.
Dael brings up something irrelevant.
Yeah, Dael talks about being in theater at school when we're talking about Dragonlance or something. It's cute.
Wow.
It
that
is
makes me so
incredible.
happy. When I was in high school, we did a production of The Lieutenant of Inishmore, which is an Irish play. It's a black comedy. Anyway, look, let's just skip through the storyline. But for this production,
how does this relate to a plushie?
I'm getting there. I promise it's relevant.
I am forgiven for every segue I have ever made.
This is an anecdote, not a segue. All right, segues. Give me a minute.
Yeah, cool story, Ben. Anyway,
I'm rapping background.
I was in Les Mis when I was younger, and
it was about Martin McDonagh.
Skeuomorphism is a term that has entered my vocabulary permanently when talking about how to create for the internet. So, those are some of my memories. Do any of you have anything back on the year from the Lorecast that you feel?
I think Dael's mom coming in to answer questions.
True.
is amazing, and maybe she should be a guest sometime, and that'll save us the step of having to wait for her to answer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
She'll
true.
just already know who the philosopher I'm trying to remember is.
Exactly.
I have a lot of love for when we were talking about the intricacies and difficulties of the Speak with Dead spell and how it causes so much trouble in terms of trying to set up a mystery. And then Shawn just said, the bad guy could wear a mask. It's not that hard.
That's true. Hey, Shawn Merwin wisdom drop of the year.
I also have very strong memories of basically picking fights. I remember trying to fight Ben over whether or not a fire elemental should take damage from a bucket of water. Let it turn into steam. Let me get some drama.
Yes,
Benjamin, if you hit me with that in a game, I would be so mad at you.
If you have a bucket of water and there's a house on fire,
it is doing additional damage.
I'm melting.
If I'm in a D&D game and there's a house on fire and I throw some water on the fire, I expect the fire to be less bad now. More than 1 damage.
No, well, how many gallons is the bucket?
Oh my God. I was ready to throw down.
Yeah.
Also, I did, in review of some of these moments, I came back across when we were talking about the Moon Sorcerer for the first time. Fire. Dreadful. But Ben's doing his thoughtful disagreement arm cross. No. Your thing about it being radiant doesn't matter to me. You're misunderstanding what a sun god is. You're misunderstanding what a god of light is. Gods are not elemental.
Well, they can be.
I mean, sort of. It doesn't actually have anything to do with how gods function as a religious and societal structure. But my issue with Sacred Flame is twofold. So, maybe I need to cool my jets a little bit.
Absolutely not. Bring it every week.
That's good radio, Dael.
That's right.
Ben Burns segues. Does anyone have a favorite Ben Burns segue?
Speaking of Ben Burns segue.
But speaking of implementing things in campaigns, we are going to implement the end of this episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
That one was really rough.
But speaking of hunting monsters, you know what I really like to hunt for is unique Lego sets. Speaking of high hopes, I have high hopes for the future. And what is the future if not the children? Well, speaking of things that are metaphorical, this podcast is metaphorical for... Speaking of science, science is used for many things, including the creation of ring lights. Speaking of things that need to be broadened out.
Speaking of one other important thing.
Speaking of Spelljammer, this next book has nothing to do with it.
Speaking of Ben Burns segues.
Shawn, that's a great segue.
It's just that I noticed that earlier in the year, your segues were fine. I don't know what happened, but something set you down a path of violence.
I got encouraged, to be honest. I did one bad one and everybody seemed to enjoy it. So
this is how we're living.
It is legitimately fun going back because I was sort of reviewing episodes from earlier in the year as well, particularly our sort of New Year's episode at the start of 2022. And how fresh and green we were back then. I think you can sort of, speaking for myself mainly, you can sort of see how I'm like, hello everybody and welcome to the Lorecast. I hope you enjoy being here. Thank you for and now I just don't care. Whatever. Like speaking of not caring, James, hey, do you have any memories that
Wow.
See, look how confident I've become.
All the Ben Burns segues I was going to talk about, throw them out the window. I love this podcast. I love being here, but I honest to God, have to say, I instantly forget everything we talk about as soon as the cameras go off.
Okay, I see how it is.
Yeah. This exists within sort of a pocket dimension, this podcast for me.
I like my favorite Witcher watch has got to be you being so angry at Liam Hemsworth.
And they're casting Liam Hemsworth, so not even the good Hemsworth.
So you're not to denial yet. You're still at anger. Is that what we're getting?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure Liam Hemsworth will do a fantastic. I'm Geralt of Rivia. I'm coming to. Oh crikey! There's a big croc. I'm going to jump on it. You know, whatever. However he approaches the role
for doing nothing wrong.
I'm sure he'll be fine. I'm just
I mean,
imagining.
He's a Hemsworth. He'll cope, but also it's very funny.
I'm just imagining Russell Coight as the Witcher. That is an incredibly local reference. I'm realizing.
Good luck, Yanks.
Yeah. Understanding that reference. Or Steve Irwin. I just imagine Liam Hemsworth doing Steve Irwin as the Witcher, going, "Oh crikey, we've got a monster here. Look at the size of his teeth." And then he goes and grabs its tail. Anyway,
what about every single time that James picked up on some little thing that I said, and it just became such a big deal? Hinky and the Tinkering.
That
Legacy Media, you just didn't let him lie. You were like, no.
To be fair, Thread the Bridge, which was one of James's, has
Thread the
become
Bridge,
part of my
that's true,
vernacular.
that's true.
I just use that constantly now. But all that being said, we need to thread the bridge from 2022 to 2023.
Speaking of bridges we haven't threaded.
Yeah,
speaking of bridges.
There we go. I'm going to make you responsible for segues from now on, James.
Speaking of tinkering.
If you have been enjoying the Eldritch Lorecast over the last 12 months, our first full year of podcasting by the time this episode goes up, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back next year and for the rest of, until the heat death of the universe, I'm sure we will be here until we really are the number one tabletop RPG podcast. What am I talking about? We already are. So, my name's been Ben Byrne. I've been here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake. Happy holidays, everybody. Happy New Year. And we will see you all next week, or should I say, next year.
Oh. Okay.
Good night, everybody.
And we're out.